Nour Alshaer is a medical student at the Islamic University of Gaza. She's originally from Rafah. Nour left earlier this month and she went to Egypt. She's joining us from there. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Can you describe to us what things were like when you were working before you decided to leave?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yes, so as a medical student whose med school got bombed, whose education was interrupted, I just found, I don't know, like the best decision for me to do is really just like to go and volunteer at hospitals. And the thing is, like, life in Gaza currently and for the past 7 to 8 months, the problem there is that you never know what the right thing or the wrong thing to do if you want to like stay alive or survive, or if you want to be safe, right? Like, for example, I started to volunteering at a Najjar hospital in Rafah. And that hospital is like around about 20-minute walk from my house. So I used to walk there, and going there, like on my way there, like you couldn't know if it would be safe for me to walk there. And obviously I'll be walking because there's no gas and no fuel for cars, like to find transportations. The best thing to find would be like hopping on an animal cart, and that wouldn't be always available. And like a lot of people find it funny, me like wearing scrubs and like riding on them and get to the hospital, but most of the time I'll be walking. And on my route from my house to the hospital, there's so many houses and places that got bombed. And that's the thing, like they were bombed, just not at the time I was walking by. But if they did, like if they were bombed when I was walking by, I wouldn't be alive now. That's the thing. Everywhere is risky. There's no place that you could you could look at and be like, yeah, okay, I can be here and be safe, And then when I get to An-Najjar, well, that's a hospital, and like proven by what's been happening for the past 7 to 8 months, hospitals themselves could be considered even more risky than other places. So yeah, so I get there, I start volunteering at the emergency department and the ortho emergency department. I personally used to deal with at least 100 patients per shift. Like I used to work in 24-hour shifts, and because especially at the time, because like everybody was asked to move to the south and especially to Rafah. And the thing about Rafah, I'm originally from Rafah. The thing about Rafah, just before October happened, we were always like, for years now, we're always, like protesting and calling for a building of a hospital in Rafah. So Rafah does not really have a hospital in it, like not like Al-Shifa or Nasser or any of the bigger kind of medical complexes that we have in other cities. Rafah never really had a hospital. And that was like one of the problems. It could be intentional of asking people to move to the south, because Gaza City has more infrastructure, more institutes, more hospitals, more equipment, more of kind of everything, and asking people to go to the south is really getting them to places where they're already, like less resources and all that. So the An-Najjar hospital is really small, but we have to deal with so many cases all the time, like really just like starting with infections as simple as upper respiratory infections and, gastroenteritis and like some gastric infections, and also casualties from the bombings as well. And we were always like working, on the floor, and there has always been limitations on everything. I studied at med school for 3 years. I did not study for so long, but I learned some things, and what I was experiencing and what I was working at the hospital was so different than anything I ever learned.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I do want to ask you about that. I mean, obviously, we around the world have been watching the pictures of the injuries and the suffering that people have been going through in Gaza. You have been there. You have been in the hospitals of people have been coming in with injuries who are suffering. Can you describe to us what life has been like as you and your colleagues have been trying to work through the numbers of people who've been coming in to get treatment?
Exactly. That's what I was about to actually talk about. Like, I had to learn how to prioritize who lives or dies, kind of like who we actually work on, who we use our limited resources on, who, like, I hate to say this, but like who deserves to be worked on, who deserves, like to use the limited resources and equipment and instruments and medication that we have on. I also had to learn how to, like prioritize who to give local anesthesia, like when we're stitching, like some patients, even like if it's available, we have to prioritize who we give it to. Like I personally had to stitch hands of mothers who just lost their babies, who just lost their children, without even being able to give them local anesthesia where I was, stitching their hands. It was, like the resources part was really horrible. There were no beds. Like An-Najjar hospital had like around 63 beds. And you're talking about 1.5 million people. who were like in Rafah at some point who needed like medical care at Al-Najjar. A lot of the cases like who would go to Al-Kuwait hospital would actually also be referred to Al-Najjar because Al-Najjar is more like of a kind of bigger and more like, the governmental hospital that had like more kind of tools and devices. So yeah, so we had to work on them on the ground. And yeah.
Nour, I want to ask you, I mean, you've obviously moved to Egypt, as we mentioned. What was it that made you decide to leave? Obviously, your medical training, the limited, as you say, training that you had is vitally important. There clearly must have been a very strong reason for you to want to leave Gaza.
Yeah, I never wanted to leave Gaza, and it breaks my heart every day since I got here. The thing is, like, my family already left because it just it only got more unsafe being there, and everything was just stopped. Like, they couldn't continue working on anything. My siblings could not continue any of their education or anything like that. I personally stayed behind them, and I was not really planning on leaving at all. It only happened on Monday. That was actually the last day when Rafah border was working. Actually, I woke up to the leaflets of evacuation orders to my house, asking us to leave, and I was just like, the only person left from my family. And I had to, like, at that point, I had to find, I don't know, like, make a tent for myself or find a place for my only me, like, to stay in. And it just kind of like did not sound very right to me. Like, I honestly just, it was a mess. What happened? So I really just like went to the border at 11:30. People were there at 7, and I just left. And it breaks my heart since
Nour
I
Alshaer,
left.
Please forgive me for interrupting you. I am terribly sorry, but we are very grateful to you for being with us on Al Jazeera and telling us your story. Thank you very much indeed.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.